You both. I just realized. I'm so sorry. If there's feedback, it's because I have a mic next to this one. So anyway, good morning, church. I'll say that again. Thank you. I really am glad that you are here this morning so that we can remind ourselves that we are truly children of God. We are brought together from different backgrounds, so many different experiences, and yet we are definitely meant to be together. We are meant to work together, to believe in the greater good, to work to create spaces where everyone belongs, where no one is excluded. Exactly. To do that, my friends, we have to focus on love. And we have to focus on what it means to create peace within us, right? So that we can go out in the world and do more of that peace and then extreme and get those ripples going all out. When we come here to this place, we remind ourselves that we are not brought together just by our own volition, but we are brought together by God who created each and every one of us. And this is the God that we worship. So this morning, we're going to ask the choir to sing that one more time. Dona nobis pacem, let there be peace, bring peace to us. When they finish with that, we're going to move into just singing it over and over and over again. If you want to look at your hymnal, you can. It's number 376. My guess is that you'll just kind of figure it out, sing whatever part you want, and we'll just let the stream of peace consciousness be among us. Amen. if you're ready. Yeah. What is that? Last Sunday when I was here, I was very aware that when we got to this Sunday, no matter what the results over the election were, we were going to get to hear two teenagers play in church for the first time. So I knew for sure that there would be some iota of great joy. So please listen to Joey and Rhea as they share their offering with us and with God. We'll get there. There's Sharon and Mandy Young with their two grandbabies, so Sadie and Sawyer. It's Sadie Elizabeth and Sawyer Lee, and they were baptized this morning at the first service. And I know Randy and Sharon have never been to the first service before, but they did today because those babies' nap time is now. And so parents said, if we're going to have them baptized, it's got to be at the first service. But anyway, just wanted you to be able to share in the joy that we welcomed into the family of God two more beautiful children who did not cry at all. They just went right through it and said, go ahead, name me a child of God. So let's stand and sing together.
Eternal God, there are days when we look at the news and we weep. We weep because, as a fellow said the other night on the news, when 3 people were hit by a car, that you just never know what the next 30 seconds are going to bring, and you'd better live it good now. And then we hear the news about a wildfire that stretches quickly through an area, and people barely escape with their lives, and some didn't even take their shoes. And we worry about a world that just seems to be going crazy. All of creation groans and struggles. And even Manhattan Island was covered with smoke from a wildfire. And so we come. We come because somehow we know that when we gather together, there are those who will give us a moment of hope. And there were baptisms. There are children who are growing up around us. There are those who are willing to share their talents with us. And we have young people who are playing their instruments for worship and to glorify you. And we begin to realize that when we gather, when we work with one another, there is that sparkling of a new sense of love in this community, which will reach out into the neighborhoods around us and continue to grow. And it gives us hope that that arc of justice will come, even if it's so slowly, and we will be those who are celebrating your goodness and your love, and we are able to pray, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen.
Good morning. Hear these words from the 3rd chapter of Ruth. Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, My daughter, I need to seek some security for you, so that it may be well with you. Now, here is our kinsman Boaz, with whose young women you have been working. See, he is winnowing barley tonight at the threshing floor. Now, wash and anoint yourself, and put on your best clothes, and go down to the threshing floor. But do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. When he lies down, observe the place where he lies. Then go and uncover his feet and lie down, and he will tell you what to do. She said to her, All that you say, I will do. This is the word of life.
Before I get started, we're going to do a couple different things here. I just noticed the lights aren't on up here. And in case Chuck Schaefer is watching, here, Chick, this is for you. It's for all of us. And then the other thing is, we saw Paige come forward to me, and she said, Are you going to do the children's moment? I forgot to tell them that no, and now I see you here. I'm so sorry. I didn't do your children's moment because I didn't see you earlier. I apologize. Are you cool with that today? Afterwards, we can talk, okay? Sorry about that, Mira. Anyway, we skipped an entire chapter in Ruth. Okay? Last week we did stuff from chapter 1, and today we were on chapter 3. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what you missed in there, but first I'm going to do a recap from last week in case you don't remember everything I say week to week. Okay? So from chapter 1, we know that Naomi and Ruth have both lost their husbands and they are headed to another land. The land happens to be Bethlehem. And we didn't talk about that last week, but when we think about Bethlehem, we think of a warm and fuzzy place. But it is also a place where people from Moab, like Ruth, people in Bethlehem, were despised, okay? If you were from Moab, you need to understand that. Put that into context today. So they make their cross-country trek, okay? They arrive, and as expected, they are now on the struggle bus, okay? Naomi, remember, she's the mother-in-law. She has had both her sons die and her husband. She is discouraged, and she gives herself a new name. She calls herself, it's not Mira, okay, but it's Mara. And Mara means bitter. It's understandable, right? Okay, now we get to chapter 2, okay, and this is the one that we skipped. If Ruth and Naomi are going to survive as widows in Bethlehem, they will need to find a way to provide for themselves. So Ruth, who has already shown great faithfulness to her mother-in-law, Naomi, she genuinely intends to care and provide for Naomi in her grief as she ages, okay? That is her intent. And so Ruth comes up with a plan. She decides she's going to go out into the fields where she can follow behind the hired harvesters and gather up or glean, you've heard that word, whatever they have passed over, okay? This was a law in the land that people could go after everything else that had already been gotten and they could take from themselves, okay? This is a little bit how they took care of people who didn't have enough. It's a good thing. Now, it's very hard labor, as you can imagine, but Ruth is willing to do whatever it takes, and that's kind of what we have to keep in mind. Now, it happens, okay, that the field is owned by Boaz, who happens to be a relative of Naomi's late husband Elimelech, and happens to be a man of very good reputation. And it just happens that Boaz sees Ruth gleaning in his field. Yes. And so he finds his field manager and he says, "Who is that girl?" And it just happens that Boaz and Ruth are described then with the same Hebrew adjective, sha'il, which can be translated as worthy, honorable, or of valor. Okay? Now, we already knew that about Ruth from first chapter of Ruth, right? From the first chapter, but now we know that Boaz is described with some of the very same words. Interesting. Now, I do wish that I was preaching on chapter 2 so that we could talk about all of the reasons that Boaz notices Ruth. Is it because she's of a different ethnicity than everybody else? Or was it because she's lagging behind the crowd? Or was he actually the kind of CEO who cared about his employees and knew them well enough to actually notice when there's something or somebody new in the group? I don't know. There's a lot of social issues that could come up out of this passage. But whatever got Boaz's attention is actually less important than the fact that the field manager chooses to tell Boaz who Ruth really is, okay? And adds that she asked permission to glean in the fields, okay? And that she's been working all day long. So Boaz then takes this information and finds Ruth and tells Ruth that she can stay in his field, as long as she wants. And she can befriend his harvesters, and if she gets thirsty, she can even share their water. Okay? So get this. Boaz says even more. He says to her that he has instructed the men who work for him not to touch her. You know, I so hope that Boaz offered that kind of protection for all of his workers. But that's giving him a lot more credit than the text suggests. Whatever the details, Boaz in this story uses his status and his authority to make the way safer for Ruth. And he acknowledges the kindness that she has done for his relative Naomi. He recognizes her faithfulness and her humility. And then get this, he goes further. He actually prays for God to bless her. And this sounds like it's not a big deal, but my friends, remember, Ruth is a Moabite woman. She's like a hated kind of person, right? He prays for God to bless her and then welcomes her to eat at his table and dip her bread into the same bowl as the others. He does not treat her with the suspicion foreigners often received in Israel. He doesn't make her stay separate from the community because of her race or her gender or her status as a widow, and a poor widow at that. You see, Boaz's legacy is either about generous hospitality or romantic aspirations. Okay. Thank goodness we're here, though, to talk about Ruth's legacy and not Boaz. So finally, we get to chapter 3. It was read aloud this morning, and I'm very surprised this is ever read aloud in church. I am hoping that Ron didn't actually look up the meaning of what he read this morning. Did you? Oh, thank goodness, because everything in this paragraph is a euphemism. Everything. The threshing floor is like getting a room. Uncovering feet is not feet. Not feet, okay? So I want you to put the pieces together, because even though my children are not here today, there are a few of you who have your children sitting with you, even if they're adults, okay? Basically, what is happening is that Naomi sees the attention and the care that Boaz is showing Ruth, okay? And she has this grand idea that maybe he will be their kinsman redeemer. Okay, that's a word we don't know very much these days, but it's a very important word in biblical times. The closest male next of kin, could be a brother, okay, can then marry the widow after she has lost her husband. Okay, by law, they are supposed to redeem the widow. Does this make sense? As you can imagine, though, many brothers and uncles aren't exactly interested in this, and they find a way to weasel their way out of the situation. It's weird now, it was weird then, okay? It was. But the thing is, it was still called a redeeming act because it truly was the way unprotected females could be taken in, they could be cared for, and they could be part of a family again, okay? It's a really important thing. Now, Boaz does not have to do this for Ruth, okay? It's Naomi that was his relative, not Ruth. Naomi. But Ruth knows that if she can get Boaz to marry her, then he will take care of not only her, but also Naomi. You got this? Yeah. It's supposed to be this really lovely story, right? And remember, if you were here last week, we talked about the fact that Ruth is kind of this movie story, an account right here, right, of this huge thing that's going on. We've got a horrible famine happening. We have horrible, terrible kings who are in the rule right now. And so then this little story just gives us a little reflection of a small family and what's happening. Okay, so that chapter 2 gives us a little taste of romance, right, to help sweeten the deal of the kinsman redeemer, make it not seem quite so bad. Remember? Ooh. Right? If you take that into account, that helps a little bit. But at the same time, I can't help it. You guys, I'm also a female. And so I look at this book and I read through this, and I am assuming that they assumed that Ruth was fine with all of this attention. We don't know. Right? But what we do know is that Ruth risks a whole lot to make their life work out. You know, because to go out and glean in a field, it's risky business. You might get your food for the evening, but you're still a woman alone. You are a target. To go to the threshing floor and work this plan, it's gutsy, really gutsy. Now, Ruth doesn't refuse, but she also doesn't act timidly or just kind of wait for things to happen. Instead, Ruth gets ready. She puts on her very best clothes. I doubt that they looked as roomy as this, right? She makes sure that she is as presentable as possible for a night on the threshing floor. All right? She helps Boaz get past the point of no return. Seriously, it says all this. And then she offers herself by uncovering his feet. Naomi said then, if you read it in there, it says, Boaz will tell you what to do. How nice of him, right? Yeah. Anyway, my friends, we have been through a lot this week. And one thing that elections show us is that people see the very same situation in very different ways. even to the point where we absolutely cannot fathom the other side's point of view. We can't. People can come to the same exact table, and they still describe a completely different experience, right? People can have the same goal, and it doesn't seem possible, but it's true. They can have the same goal, and they will go at it in a way that another person can never even begin to understand. Now, Ruth's way of finding a husband is one that I will never, ever try. But according to this time in that place, it was not bad, and it was not wrong. In fact, it was courageous. Courageous. You know, over and over again, Ruth's courage rises to the top. It does. Her boldness drives her to make decisions about her future rather than just let it be determined by someone else. Her willingness to put herself in the line of danger, it requires a kind of courage that will not be forgotten, not in her time, and not for anyone who is willing to hear and read and ponder her story. You know, I really do not believe that Ruth took any of these actions without a lot of consideration. This was a woman who had already been through famine. She'd been in refugee status. She'd become a widow. Her life experience was vast, even at a young age. But I have to believe that there also was something else that helped her bring that courage to the surface. She had spent a decade with her mother-in-law, Ruth. I said that wrong, didn't I? Naomi. Yeah. She had spent a decade witnessing a mother who worshiped a God that she, Ruth, now was claiming as her own. It was a God that she had come to respect and trust and pray to and then follow. And this was a God who she had seen, who called people to hard things, a God who asked for their hearts and not just their hands, a God who had rules in the rule book that sometimes sounded very odd, but worked out for good in the end, even good for her. You see, Ruth had seen God work in their lives, even when Naomi's family had first traveled to Moab when they were desperately in need of food. Because you know what happened for her? That move was the reason she met the love of her life. Not Boaz, her first husband, the love of her life. And then Ruth had stayed with her mother-in-law out of faithfulness, absolutely. But then she led with courage as they made their way to Bethlehem. And Ruth believed that if she would give it all that she had, that God would meet them. The root word of courage is cor, the Latin word for heart. Now, courage originally meant to speak one's mind by telling one's whole heart. Okay? Over time, of course, courage has become synonymous with heroics, right? Or, as the dictionary defines it, courage is the mental or moral strength to face fear, danger, or difficulty, and to do something difficult even when there's risk. Second, the ability to persevere and withstand difficult situations. Yeah. These days, I think we teach our young that courage is standing up for what you believe in, even when others may not agree. Right? Speaking up for what is right rather than what is popular. Putting yourself in the face of danger to save maybe yourself, but also others. Right? All of that. But these are definitions that have shifted slightly. Courage truly was once seen as speaking honestly and openly from the heart. Putting yourself out there, all your feelings, your experiences. And in the Bible, truly, when we get the word courage, it's telling your whole heart. So as Brené Brown says, ordinary courage is about putting a vulnerability on the line. And in today's world, that's pretty extraordinary. You know, many of us need to unleash our courage. And we need the experience of unleashing our courage, of letting our hearts be revealed so that we might actually discover how God responds to us with love and more courage, with inspiration, with transformation. You see, that kind of courage and that kind of response back to us leads to feeling alive and giving us purpose. My friends, Ruth had courage, and she leaves a legacy of courage for her family and her friends. She especially leaves a legacy of courage for anybody who's ever been a refugee, anyone who's ever had to make a way where there seemed to be no way. So this week, may you find the strength to look inside yourself to see where your courage needs to be unleashed. And then let it rise to the surface so that your whole heart has a chance to meet the care of God. Amen? Amen. Tomorrow it's actually Veterans Day, but also it happens to be 11/11. So tomorrow morning, we get to celebrate the life of Marla Swayze, 11/11 at 11. I'm pretty sure they did that on purpose. But if not, it's great. 11/11 at 11, right here. Marla Swayze's life will be celebrated. Leanne's here with her husband. It's super fun to see you. And Leanne's going to sing tomorrow. Sharon's going to play, of course. We'll celebrate, right? Would you stand if you can? My friends, may God's courage and compassion empower you. As Ruth found strength to create a way forward, may you be bold, trusting God's guidance and love to meet you. Amen. Let's sing one more time.